From titanic pachyderms to the largest bat, there are very few creatures in Gavilia that could withstand the might of one of the divine titans. Masters of their respective domains, rulers over those beneath them, there are very few things that could ever match the raw power and versatility of a titan. Even the most experienced Farseeker will find themselves lacking when faced with not just a large animal, but the closest thing to a force of nature that any mortal could encounter. But what requirements are needed to be classified under one of the three titanic classes? Why is it that an Aspartian lion or saber-fang, who are both apex predators within their own rights, are outclassed by the belligerent Bahamut and the Gavilian bear? In this chapter of the Gavilian Bestiary, we shall discuss the topic of the three divine titan classes. To answer the question for how animals are judged and sorted within these classes, we would need to delve into the beginnings of the Farseeker Guild for at least a brief moment. At the behest of a strange old man dressed in red robes, King Jarsil Thunderhand of the Fars-carved dwarves had sent out messengers to speak with King Ostalaron of the Elvari Kingdom, Queen Naxale of the Elferi Kingdom, Princess Sintar of the Alcide, the Sand Elves, and Queen Althea of the Centerling Kingdom of Astrea. These are the humans. Despite the dwarves, orcs, and Shoten being newcomers to this world following the events of the Ravaging, the elves and men of the continent welcomed the Taurians to their home. Following the siege of Thunder Peak, a group of heroes came together to face against a threat that would have threatened the entire stability of the South, under the banner of the Boar King. King Jarsel, tactfully, suggested the Farseekers to be a collaboration between races. The Outworlders, along with the native peoples, would be able to aid in researching and repelling any monsters that wandered too close to civilized settlements without the use of deploying armies and expending precious resources to do so. Instead, the Farseekers would be their own dedicated organization to handle monster threats, answering only to the royals and high-ranking members of the military. A stepping stone, if you will, to help pave the path towards a long road of mutual understanding between the races that only recently became aware of one another. After a few months of waiting, he had received answers of cautious optimism and stalwart agreement. Thus, the Farseekers and the Dragoon Guilds were created. The first creature to be documented was the Bahamut, a hippopotamus relative that outweighed their cousins by a few thousand maces. Moira and Raven Silkweaver barely managed to avoid becoming smears on the ground when two large Bahamut males dueled each other for dominance and mating rights. After assessing to see how injured they were, they decided that the first large creature that they encountered on their journey would be the name of the first class. Moira coined the term behemoth for the class of large terrestrial animals. The second creature was encountered merely by chance, as Moira and Raven were exploring and documenting the coastal shores of the Elsors. They approached what they believed was just a mass of gray flesh that was decomposing and causing the entirety of the beach to smell. As it turned out, it was the corpse of a whale. And to add more to the surprise, it wasn't just the corpse of a whale, it was also being feasted upon by a female sea dragon who was very hungry and very gravid. It was by Raven's quick thinking that the two Farseekers managed to duck into the cool waterfall nearby before they could even be attacked by the steam attack of the sea dragon, which most likely would have boiled them alive. Seeing as Terra was not just proof of one, but two large aquatic animals, Raven suggested that they named the second class to be Leviathan. The third class was named by, well, me. I was traveling with my own group of fellow Farseekers and had the opportunity to witness two Thunderbirds performing a mating ritual upon a nearby cliff top during a tremendous thunderstorm. The display of lightning had Well, as embarrassing to say, it made my beard hairs stand on end. But I do not regret it in the least. Not at all. The display was wondrous and awe-inspiring. I guess it's the closest thing that I could ever come to seeing a display of two gods doing a dance together. Remembering a Shoten legend of a large eagle companion of their god Ashinag, I had named the third class based upon the name of this companion, which was Garuda. Now that we have discussed the origins of the three classes and the names chosen for them, we can now discuss the qualifications that would allow an animal to be placed under either of these three classes, or for them to just be considered an ordinary animal. And I use ordinary lightly. Firstly is size and weight. To be considered a member of either class, an animal must exceed the height of 9 feet and the weight of 240,000 maces, or 1 ton by human measurement. An Elsaurian elk, for example, is indeed a large animal, but it is not heavy nor tall enough to be in the behemoth class. However, a Gavilian bear outweighs the elk and is thus considered a member of the behemoth class. The second factor to consider is ecological impact. Does the animal affect or have some sort of beneficial element that it brings to the biomes or the creatures around it? Thunderbirds, as a decent example, are carrion-eating predators who will eat any dead corpses that they come across, whilst also being predators. Another thing as well to consider with thunderbirds is they have specialized glands, primarily for defense. But with these glands, they can redirect or absorb lightning into themselves for later use. And that is to the benefit of other creatures in the environment around them. You see, their presence is also a deterrent for any large avian predators and even dragons, as they can use the lightning to defend themselves. And this positive discharge of energy will then go into the earth, and it will encourage beneficial elements to interact with one another in the soil. Mountain trolls are another example. They are hypercarnivores and seemingly rule over their lands with an iron fist, eating many of the fauna and having their choice of ore-rich boulders that they could eat. But this also helps reduce herbivore numbers, and their feces can produce the finest of ores and the most potent of manure. Well, to those who have the ability to not smell, is quite possibly the best thing you can find. Thirdly is threat level. Any animal that requires 5 or more trained soldiers to take down is considered for one of the three classes. A supermyth, for example, is one of the largest land animals in Gavilia. It would take at least 10 men to injure, and perhaps even more men just to take one down. And keep in mind, this is an herbivore that travels in groups with a very big, very wise and intelligent male who would most likely not appreciate anybody trying to hunt a member of his herd. An unintended benefit of the foundation of these classes is that it gives the creatures the respect and awe that they deserve, and it is a good way for common folk to use as a rule of thumb to ensure that they don't interfere with nature's balance too much at the risk of harming themselves. Thus, this will cause them to report any unusual behavior to the guilds. Even the most passive animal can cause severe repercussions to a region if the region lacks the resources to sustain it. Much better to try to drive the animal away, educate the village, establish an outpost, and compensate them for damages done by said animals, and in some cases the hunters. But it is much preferable than actually hunting the animal outright. With these three qualifications out of the way, we can discuss why they are so important to the guild. Due to how powerful and dangerous one of these creatures can be, it is important to document and also spread awareness of these creatures to the common folk, but most especially those in power. The worst scenario for any Farseeker is to hear the story of a rogue supermyth that went on a rampage throughout a village, only to be put down and discover that the cause for the tragedy was due to an angry farmer getting upset that the supermyth and its herd were eating from his crops, tried to harm it, and resulted in a farmer's tool getting stuck in the tusk of a dominant bull, driving him mad with pain, and resulting in the death of this animal, as well as the destruction it was caused. Even poachers could be a problem, as overhunting, even trophy hunting, and the ivory trade can lead to hunts going very, very wrong. One such case was with a very angry Raijin tiger, attacking a village for the death of her mate. Anything that had the scent of her mate's blood, or even the scent of the one who hunted her mate, was destroyed immediately as soon as she smelled it. And that also included people as well. It is also best to remember that the guild is not just a monster slaying guild, nor is it pest control. Even though we have the training and weapons to hunt monsters, killing an animal is the least preferable outcome. Research and relocation are preferred methods. There are exceptions to this rule, and they go along this way. Man-eaters, like mountain trolls, who would likely eat an entire village, the livestock, and the buildings that people reside in just to sate its large appetite, would be killed on sight if it becomes too much of a problem to handle, as their skin is far too dense and their teeth far too strong to withstand even the densest of armor. I feel pity for any poor retired soldier who comes out in full plate only to be immediately crunched on by a very angry and hungry mountain troll. Another example would be elderly or injured individuals who are unable to hunt their preferred prey, and thus go after the more common and easier sentient races. Unfortunately, in cases with elderly and injured individuals, relocation is not an option, as they would continue to prey on villagers just to prolong their life, and by extension their suffering. Another reason for the guild directly intervening is if there are exceptional individuals or even mutants that cause an imbalance in the ecosystem, or do damage to members of the guild that they have been ousted or even lost touch with. Such lone individuals that have also been ousted can wreak havoc in an environment as they travel, since the native predators within the region may either be too slow or unable to take down this individual. The problem is not just exclusive to apex or high-ranking monsters. It can occur with pack hunters like Otobaji and Morgs. A single lone individual could travel to, say, a region, and without any predators that would be able to oust it or chase it away, it can cause significant damage to the environment as a whole. With the explanation of the classes and the goals of the guild out of the way, we can give a list of the current animals we have sorted so far. For the Behemoth class, we have the Supermyth and other members of the Mammoth family, the Bahamut, the Grootslang, Trolls, Ogres, the Nothbear, Agnodon and its cousin the Boreodon, and finally the Ichneumon. Pardon me, I do not know the proper pronunciation for this creature, as I am a dwarf, and this seems to be human in origin. For Leviathan class, we have the Sea Dragon, the Emperor Seal, the Acklet, Glaciocetus, and other large whales, Cthulcus, Basilisk, and Pharodilus. For the Garuda, we have the Roc, the Thunderbird, Wyvern, and the Seawing, and the Drasphorots. The danger these creatures can pose by themselves would make any hunt difficult to successfully complete. But this danger can also increase tenfold, as some of these animals travel or hunt in groups. Supermyth are known herd animals. They travel in groups of 30 or so individuals who are led by an elderly male. Raijin tigers travel in groups of 3, 2 parents and a cub. Thunderbirds and their cousins the rock hunt and travel in mated pairs, increasing the danger level very significantly. The divine class and the rank therein allows the guild to assess the danger and how many Farseekers are needed to handle the issue that could occur. Much better to let the professionals handle the threat and to keep one's head down, eh? Hopefully with explaining why the importance of the 3 Titan classes and why they exist, how dangerous members of the classes could be to ordinary folk, and the origins as well as the goals of the guild, it will allow you new Farseekers to be better informed and armed with the knowledge necessary to keep others safe and not rush in headfirst to fight something beyond your skill to handle alone. It is also necessary that we have to have outposts manned by competent Farseekers to stop and prevent poachers from doing harm to the animals in the region, as it could have drastic repercussions for the village under our protection. Traditional hunts and cultural animal capture is to be monitored, yet respected. However, that does not mean we should completely let villagers slaughter entire herds of animals just because it's a rite of passage, so to speak. If the animal population suffers, we must then intervene. Keep in mind, our goal is to maintain the ecology of the continent. And overhunting is not something that we should tolerate within the least. We should also keep in mind there is a fine line between traditions that allow or need an individual to hunt an animal because it is cultural in origin, and poaching. Poaching implies greed. Poaching implies there's a market for animal parts, for medicine pieces, that even now, in this current day and age, is not necessary in the least. However, there are still individuals who will see this market, and they will still try to cater to it. And that is actually what the Farseekers have been founded to fight against, poachers and overhunting. After all, just because we have to document and observe and maintain an environment doesn't mean we shouldn't fight for it. With all that said and done, this is where I shall end this chapter for you, my friends. I appreciate you for sitting down and listening to my voice. The guild master is unfortunately ill with the pox. It seems that they opened up a recent cavern filled with gold, but did not take into account the insects that live there that have been spreading this virus. Hence why I sound tired, as the guildmaster has been asking me to maintain his health of late. Until next time, my friends. Well, thank you for listening through my video. This hopefully sounds a little better. Let me adjust the mic right here. Thank you for listening. This is the technically 3rd video on the channel, but I kind of wanted to mention a few other things that either I couldn't squeeze in to the video for the sake of brevity, or mostly due to the fact that they might be brought up further down the line. So, to answer a few questions in regards to magic, the magic system is sound-based, or technically speaking, music-based. I wrote it down. I wish I had the chart with me, or I could present it on the screen if I'm able to find it. But essentially, it's every race has exclusive types of magic, whether they be elemental, emotional, or anything of the sort, right? And there are chords for every single item and thing, and even living animals that produce a chord. Now, sometimes it'll be heard to some individuals, to certain races, some no. Another thing to keep in mind, when I talk about this system, it's kind of like a balancing act, right? So, the reason why I bring up emotional magic, orcs can do emotional magic. They channel it through anger or through passion, and that is one of their strong suits. Another thing as well is humans are able to use magic, almost all types of magic. They're pretty proficient with most of these elements. It just depends on how long they train and master it, right? So a human wizard will be on par with an elf sorcerer who is relatively young, right? There's kind of like a cap that gets hit for the human in terms of raw power, but it's the versatility that allows them to be able to generate and conduct these spells in such a manner, right? Oof. If I may sound a little run down or a little out of breath, I had just participated in a concert not even like a few days ago, so I am a little exhausted and sore. Trying to get away from a mosh pit is, well, it can be painful. So that is all I'm going to touch on in regards to magic. I'll explain how magic works in depth. I'll explain how warlocks are kind of like the lepers of the setting, but the problem is it's kind of self-inflicted. How the warlock crisis and how repression of mages and the lack of proper education has caused necromancers and warlocks to skyrocket significantly in number. And this has caused a rise in undead resurrections and attacks. Because even though if you may kill the necromancer, sometimes the magic is self-sustaining enough that the undead can just wander around into the wild, right? Which can be a problem, right? You can cut the head off the snake, but in this particular case, that snake is going to keep trying to wriggle around and do things, right? However effectively or ineffectively it will be until effectively its battery runs out. One of the first animals that will have their own video, their own dedicated video after the trolls and the ogre video, is the supermyth, which I brought up at least a few times in this particular video. I wanted to start off with at least some of the biggest creatures first and then start to work my way down, unless you guys want me to kind of pepper in some of the smaller creatures in there. I'll do the endemic life, so that'll be smaller birds, smaller mammals. I'll do a fish video, or I'll just probably put them all together. These are just mostly the critters that live in the setting to sustain or flesh out the setting. Maddening as it is a necessary thing for this project. You can't just have large herbivorous animals, large carnivorous animals without something sustaining or maintaining the plant life, or even the insects that live in the region, right? I have a few insect eaters, one of which I still have to draw. Another one is kind of like a mix of an aardvark and a anteater, and you can also see some calicotherium in there. So to mention the supermyth, getting back on track, because this is unscripted. I feel like towards the end of these videos, I will do more unscripted segments because it gives you all a bit more insight into myself when I'm not reading a script. You can tell me if I should stick to a script or not. So, in terms of the supermyth and the mammoth family, which are all essentially just pachyderms, large elephants and elephant relatives. If for those who don't understand what that terminology is, don't worry about it. You could either look it up, or I'll explain it in its own video in fantasy terms. But one thing that you'll notice is that is not included in Behemoth class that I didn't make mention of is elephants, right? There are no elephants like African or Asiatic elephants, right? And that's because they went extinct. They were outcompeted. And this is where there might be some videos that will take a while to do, because there was something that I wanted to do, which is kind of akin to the land bridge that happened millions of years ago. But in this case, it's extending to different worlds and planets, essentially. It allowed flora and fauna from different regions to essentially be carried over and cross over to different places, right? It explains why you have pachyderms in this region, and you have basically dinosaurs as well. You have large crocodiles, you have large hippos, you have all this megafauna that has succeeded in this environment because this environment caters there, right? So whereas in our world, elephants are essentially the ones that made it. Over there, Paleoloxodon, the mammoth, the mastodon, they managed to survive during the crossing. And of course, another thing as well, this will get touched on in some of the races video. Some of the races will have traits that are either shared or are similar, or if not identical, to some animals we see. An example would be agrias. Agrias have a very mandrill-like face, but their proportions indicate that they're very primate-like. But they share traits with bears, but they're not related to humans and primates at all. They're more closely related to elves, who I have not yet written the origin species of elves, but they are related, agrias and elves, which is an interesting dichotomy because agrias are the ones that wish to bring the downfall of mankind, or they are essentially representative of humans / beings that just want to live out and embrace their more darker selves, right? Some of the races that I have designed represent different facets of humanity. So that is another thing in regards to agrias, right? It's also interesting is that in their culture, they will steal metal and other items, and it doesn't matter if it's just an axe head or even just a spoon. They'll somehow incorporate it into a piece of armor because that's a piece of metal, because they associate metal with armor. So even if it's shabby armor, it does its job somewhat. Not that they really need it, but that's just something to think about. So in regards to that. But the reason why I bring up is that the agrias are an example. Actually, I'll use trolls for this. Trolls have traits that resemble that of horses and rhinoceri, and they're not related at all. So I have written in the lore, somewhere down the line, I'm going to do this in its own video, but essentially some species have different genetic pieces from different animals through the crossing that kind of just meshed into their DNA and got incorporated. So it's an explanation for why you have extremophiles like ogres having traits that are very similar to that of orcs, but they're not related. And trolls are extremophiles, and yet they have certain traits that are kicked up to 11. And so part of the theory is that during this crossing, their genetics got messed with. And sometimes that happens, right? Orcs actually have more in common to mankind, or at least to the great apes, than say elves do to humans. Even though, due to magical mumbo jumbo, I don't want to spoil too much, you can still have half breeds of either race. Orcs will they have certain primate-like behaviors. Direct eye contact, big no-no, especially if they don't know you. If they know you, they're comfortable with it. But otherwise, they see it as a challenge and disrespect, and they'll put your ass. They'll let you know, right? Trying to think. Their lower canines are essentially just traits from primates. Kind of like their lower mandible has evolved to compensate for lower tusks. So you could... That's the fun thing about the lore. You could either say that they have boar traits for the tusks, but they also have primate traits because of their behaviors and their physiques and how their body works. Denser skin, thicker muscle tissue, the way their organs act and how their blood is in comparison to a human. But I just wanted to kind of just touch on that just for a little bit. So, next video, I hope to get it out soon. It's just going to be a little slow, mostly due to the fact that I have to do a lot of, not a lot, but I do have to do some artwork. I have some commissions that I've been asked to do. So it's going to slow things down. But I probably should have it done before New Year's. Whether or not it's before Turkey Day, that is up for debate. So the videos are going to be about the trolls and then the ogres. So they're just going to have their own individual videos. And then further down the line, each individual species is going to have its own profile, their own behaviors, their own preferred designations. This is just a general explanation for them. And then there's going to be either bonus video, or I'll put them all together, where it's going to explain the predator-prey relationship between both species, where they're both predator and prey to each other. So that is the goal. I have waffled long enough. I'm going to let you guys enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, evening. Hopefully the audio is good and that you like this format. If there's any suggestions or even comments, if you even want to have a discussion in the conversation below, please, you're more than welcome to do so. Any questions I would love to answer to the best of my ability. And, yeah, that's it for now. So please remember to hit that like button, hit the subscribe. It'll help get this channel into the algorithm. I hope to flesh out the channel a lot more. I'm just starting with essentially most of the basic stuff, most of the boring shit, and then as time passes by, I'll get into the more interesting stuff, such as creatures and their individual behaviors, because it starts to get interesting, at least in my opinion, for this Fantasy Spec Evo project. So, that out of the way. I hope to see you all next time. Until then, have a good day.